Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ventures Playbook Podcast by SIA. I am your host today, Marcin Lukowicz, joined by my colleague Mo Rajput. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Paul Dutnall, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Work.Life. Work.Life was founded in 2015 and offers access to office, co-working, and event spaces. The company grew to have 11 locations in its portfolio across London, Reading, and Manchester. It's a pleasure to have you, Paul.
Really lovely to be here. Thank you both for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, we'd love to start by hearing your story. How did you end up in the role of Chief Operating Officer at Work.Life?
Sure. So my background is in what you might call premium food and beverage hospitality. So worked in various shop floor roles across food and drink operators, worked in management roles, general management roles, and eventually in sort of broader operational remits, primarily in London, but elsewhere in the UK, a couple of national businesses as well, all kind of centered around a sort of premium level of hospitality experience, creating environments that built environments people could come into. And there was a lot of synergy towards what was happening in flexible workspace. And in 2019, I moved into this sector and took a role with Work.Life. And now, in 2019, I'm now COO, as you mentioned, having led the operational efforts over the years in a head of operations director, and COO role, and really looking at, I suppose, bringing my passions for highly personal, highly attentive service, creating environments, particularly warm, welcoming, quality but unpretentious environments, and building team cultures that can deliver that at scale, bringing that into commercial real estate, which felt like what we're doing at Work.Life and what other organizations like us are attempting to do is a nice crossover of those dynamics.
Perfect. Thanks for this explanation. We will definitely follow up in terms of what makes Work.Life special in a moment. But to begin with, could you explain to our listeners what is Work.Life's business model for anyone not necessarily familiar with the industry? So the means by which you make money, essentially.
Of course. So we would describe ourselves as a flexible workspace operator. In a very simple sense, we through leasing and other agreements and arrangements with landlords, take on buildings, transform them into the spaces that we go on to operate, and offer hot desking, private offices, other on-demand and part-time solutions in various configurations on really flexible contracts with a layered-in service level, which is on-site serviced, which is member-facing experiences and perks and benefits and events and other touch points as well. And our market is primarily small SMEs, generally between sort of 1 and 50 team members, and we're able to offer them customizable office products that meet their needs today, but also give them the flexibility to transform that for what they need next, 6 months, 12 months, and into the future.
Okay, perfect. Let me read one paragraph that I recently read from Savil's blog, and then I will have a question. Flexible office space, also known as serviced office or co-working space, is emerging as a compelling solution for companies seeking more responsive and cost-effective ways to accommodate employees. While it's often perceived as a startup or young company trend, the co-working industry, already substantially developed abroad, is undergoing significant expansion in the US, catering to businesses of all sizes and from many industries. Mature corporations, once wary of flexible office space, now recognize the value it can bring to both real estate and workplace strategy. And this paragraph is actually from last month's blog. But Paul, you have been with the company for the last 6 years. Tell us what enabled Work.Life to successfully differentiate itself and grow into in this highly competitive market, right? From one side to, I believe, 11 sites now, right?
Well, yeah, it seems to be 14 actually. We're 13 now. We're growing quickly, and 14 shortly this year. Good question, and you're right to point out it's competitive, and there are lots of, and not just directly but indirectly competitive. As we well know, there are lots of places and ways that one can do work, both individually and in a team setting. I think for us, one thing that's that's been really important is we've had a pretty clear founding mission around making people's work lives happier, and what that's done is provided a real North Star to business decisions that sort of followed. So that's flowed into the sorts of spaces that we take, the size of buildings that we take, how we shape that space, the sort of amenities that we offer, the sorts of brand decisions we make in terms of how we put ourselves out to market, the sorts of members that are attracted to our proposition, how we set up service, who we hire, how we build our internal cultures. So by having that North Star, I think gives us a sense of direction, and then maybe to make that more tangible, I'd describe it as kind of a really clear and narrow focus on hospitality and this idea of happiness, and trying to think from a level of first principles about what sort of work environments will encourage people to be a little bit happier, a little bit more dialed in, able to focus when they need to, able to have connection when they need to, and generally provide for an environment that will bring the best out of people when they're at work, not just when they're working, but when they're at work. So we've been able to be quite focused, and I think that has helped, and the consistency on that has allowed us to increasingly differentiate in the market, as you say.
Okay. Well, a question, Marcin, if you don't mind me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
If I've got my timelines right, so you joined in 2019.
Yeah, early 2019.
How did you navigate COVID when that happened? It must have been literally 6 months after you joined, or relatively quickly, to sort of deal with perhaps one of the biggest challenges in the industry, right? So how did you navigate that? What did you do to sort of overcome that?
Good question. Yes, not something that I was anticipating, or obviously anybody's anticipating. And the world looked quite different in early 2020 to what it does now, particularly in our market. Just to maybe touch on some of the differences, and this might be obvious now in the way we speak about office space today, but I would describe the shift as an office being a compulsory part of work. It's where work is contained and done, to a place now where it's an option, and it's not something that you take as a given. And obviously, as an operator within that, that's pretty transformative. Aside from the period itself within COVID, I think in terms of how we manage that period, one of the things that's worth saying is I think we were fortunate enough to go into the pandemic in a good, robust and healthy state. I know it was incredibly tough for operators like us, where obviously the mandated working from home and the pressure to kind of work between, I suppose, the landlords that we're working with and leasing from, and members that we're responsible for their office space with. So going in resilient, both economically but also culturally, was really, really important to us. I think once the dust has settled on the immediate kind of understanding of what's going on here, we remained really bullish about the role the office would play, and particularly the role offices like us would play and operators like us would play. I think, without wanting to claim we foresaw much of what was to come, we felt pretty confident that we would have an increasingly important role to play, and the flexibility and the dynamic and the experiential offering really that we focused on, as in not thinking like a commercial real estate business, but thinking like an experience and hospitality business and a service business. We felt strongly that would be a good place to be emerging from the pandemic. So yes, sensible business decisions in the moment, having the good fortune to go in a good shape, but also trying to take an opportunistic view of the future. We secured 3 new locations in early 2021, which we opened that year, in the city, which at the time was a bit of a ghost town. Again, on the premise that we felt that we were betting on the future there, and we, I believe, and to the best we could, stay really true to our culture in terms of how we manage things like the team, and decisions around furloughing, and decisions around how we treated our members and looking after those within our community. I mentioned earlier, we generally work with small businesses, how we navigated that for businesses in our community that were experiencing COVID in different ways, and it was impacting their business and their operations too. So I think we broadly made some smart decisions there, which sets us up well for the future.
Were there any particular needs that you recall that significantly changed, that you had to adapt, that you could give us an example of this bullish approach that you took after COVID?
Well, I suppose the first one, and maybe the one that's the broadest that comes to mind, is quite simply that when I joined in 2019, it was very much sort of square peg, square hole, to use a phrase. A 10-person team would look for a 10-person office for 5 days a week, and it was a fairly straightforward buying decision. Where we are now is, a 10-person team could work in any number of different ways. And as somebody who provides workspace and in real life, in-person workspace to a number of businesses that want to cut it and want to do things in all sorts of ways, and also don't know that they're settled on a way of doing things and want to be able to change, you have to take a fairly fixed product, which again, I would probably oversimplify as being, we have a large amount of space for a long period of time. We're transforming it into smaller chunks of space for flexible periods of time. You now have to have new dimensions to how you do that. So it's really been about going from thinking it as a little bit two-dimensionally, we've got space for 10 people here and there's a team of 10 that would like it, to very multi-dimensional in terms of how many days would they like it for, how many people would they like to be in here, how do we make our fixed space product into a one-size-fits-one bespoke, really, really, really customizable product or range of products that you can plug in whatever you need for your business today and you can change it again tomorrow. That maybe doesn't do justice to the detail under that, but that shift has been the biggest one, and rethinking how we package and offer out our services around that has been pivotal.
Okay, thank you.
You seem to have like a really strong culture in Work.Life. Now, is that something that you've sort of, since you joined in 2019, to sort of play a really strong part in terms of, building that sort of foundational culture that is allowing you guys to sort of build upon as you grow the business going forward? And is that something that's all been part of a sort of strategic growth plan that you've got in mind?
Yeah, I don't want to claim we've been super strategic throughout. I think the simplest way to answer that is we were founded on a mission of making work lives happier, and of course we're talking about our members there, but that's got to start with us. So even before sort of getting into how we might think about that in terms of growing a business, that's the platform on which everything else happens. And to simplify it to its basic premise, if our team is happy, we're more likely to be able to make our members' teams happier. And if our team is unhappy, that will clearly have a knock on to how authentic our mission, our delivery of our mission is. So it's pretty fundamental. Then it becomes, well, how do you do that at scale? And I think one of the things that I was very much attracted by the culture in this company, and I still am, and it's a big reason I'm here. So very much a participant but we're a participant of it rather than a necessary leader of it. But it's clearly been really important to think about how we take the DNA that we're fortunate to have. And when I joined, we're in really good shape, and set that up to scale. And that's a genuine challenge. That's a genuine growth challenge for us. And I'm sure many organizations have or are experiencing the same challenges. For us, it's about what is really important in the DNA of who we are that needs to be protected, the heart of the business and the heart of the culture. How can we be clear on that? And then how can we systemize our approaches to be able to scale that? So, the way we might have done things when we were 3 or 4 spaces, and things can be quite intuitive and can be quite implied, need to be pretty explicit and need to be quite systemized and structured in order to make sure we're covering off the same things, and we're able to look after our team and be intentional about what we're doing there, but at a level where you can't kind of go around spinning plates, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Interesting that you mentioned scale, because that was my next question I had for you. So you mentioned that you've grown to now 13 and soon 14 locations, right? So what are your immediate objectives as a business? Are you now looking to grow to as many locations? And how do you know when is the right time for the next location, as opposed to ensuring each location has the best retention, the most happy customers, so with the best satisfaction? How does that process look like for you, and where are you heading as of now?
Yeah, perfect question, and that is the core of it. We have chosen to take a heavily organic growth route. So part of the answer to that question is based on us being in a position, economically that we're comfortable to bolt on some new spaces and take on some new challenges without affecting our existing business. Part of the answer to that question you referred to, which is about making sure each location is entrenched and stable and standing on its own 2 feet. We have a general a general sort of high level idea that we can a stable and mature location is one that is 90% or more occupied, that has had enough tenure within the team and the membership, that we've got a really good kind of a backing of great member sentiment that has sort of ticked our boxes in terms of the sorts of things we look for that people are saying, that is self-sufficient and stable, and it's important to us. And not mentioning any other well-known global operators in our space, but it's really important that each location is a viable and stable business as well in its own right, which allows us to have confidence to move on to the next one. We have found that at the moment that pace can look like something like 2 or 3 new locations a year, and that's a sustainable pace for us, where we can balance off both of those needs. And it is workspaces. This is what we do, and we remain bullish about the importance of in-person working environments, and so that is our product. We opened with our latest building in St Cross Street in Farringdon a dedicated event space, and we have increased our kind of efforts to look at offering our non-membership solutions like events, where we can bring in other businesses that we're not currently working with on a workspace basis and cater for them in that setting. And we feel that there's an increasing demand for more occasional opportunities to get together, which that speaks to. And we already offer up a lot of various solutions within smaller meetings for businesses, which is connected to that. But it's a similar product. We obsess over each opportunity to elevate the product, to learn from the previous building, to learn from the member feedback that we've received, to design a better building next time. And I'd like to think each building has been built on the lessons of the past, and you see that, and that we see that through the feedback as well, which is validating. And then looking forward, we're also thinking about the ecosystem that we may be able to kind of continue to build on. You know, we've got we're not joined by a particular sector or business activity. That's not the connective tissue that we've chosen to build on. We are joined by our audience, and our members are almost entirely micro SMEs, smaller teams, let's say 1 to 30, 40 people. And we have an opportunity to serve those businesses at that stage. Yes, we have a number of startups. We primarily have scale-up businesses. We see an opportunity to serve our audience in lots of ways that aren't just the underlying workspace. So that effort and the ability to find other ways to support our members is also baked into our plans for the next few years.
As a business unit, right? So we are sort of obsessed with growth, right? And measuring that and in all the jazz that comes with that. How does Work.Life go about measuring a happy customer?
It's a very good question. We have 2 ways of checking in with our members. One is the traditional Net Promoter Score route, and we like that because there's a level of benchmarking there. So we're using something that makes some sense in the wider sector and across industries. And so we lean on that pretty heavily to get a general sense of how we're going. Really, the qualitative sentiment there is more valuable than the quantitative one, in terms of giving and working out different ways to encourage members to give them the opportunity to tell us what they like and what they don't like, and kind of work from there. And then really, and I know this isn't your question, but connected to that, which I think is important, is closing that feedback loop, acknowledging feedback, doing something about it, and letting people know you did it, which sounds almost too simple to state, but I think is often missed. And then we have our own sort of work happiness measurement, which is where ultimately we're trying to answer the question of whether our members are happier having spent time with us than they might have been previous to being a member with Work.Life. And we check that in from the 6-month point and onwards. And what we're looking for there is across a couple of different dimensions, whether if we are the thing that has changed, whether we have made a positive impact on people. And defining happiness has been is an ongoing thing for us, and obviously there's a lot of research out there, but trying to make that tangible is its own challenge. But there are a few dimensions around community, feeling welcomed and sense of belonging, around your well-being, around your pride in your workspace, as well as your productivity, and some of the more obvious kind of work-related dimensions that we can measure, we can ask, and we can quantitatively measure to understand whether somebody feels in a different position to where they were when they first joined, and then over time beyond that, the longer they stay with us. It's a bit of a litmus test. I think we take it as it is, but it is an indicator that things are in the right direction.
Speaking of scaling, we just discussed the retention aspect, right, of current business. What about the acquisition aspect? Do you also have any particular reflections worth sharing regarding tools or tactics that are important when you think about scaling and focusing on attracting new customers to come to work at your places?
Sure. Well, one thing I'd probably draw on, which is specific to our sector, is that ordinarily, I think industry averages are that the vast majority of business is done via third parties, via introducers, brokerages that have the relationship with a business that's looking for workspace and plug them into a workspace operator. It's something like 3/4 or more of workspace contracts are signed that way. And we took a very early stance around wanting to be a brand that people trusted and recognized. And we have been very overt and we invest pretty heavily in brand activity. That can materialize in a few ways. It can materialize in our spaces where we're fairly heavily branded and there's a very clear look and feel to Work.Life. We take ground floor, street level, high footfall locations where we want to make a lot of noise and want to be present. And it's amazing actually the amount of interest that we get from people walking past and knocking on the door essentially and saying, hey, I'd like to talk about what you guys do. So clearly there's an attraction there. I'm sure also there will be businesses that aren't looking for that. And again, that might, to an extent, we believe that to an extent is related to the stage of business, and us serving smaller businesses at that early stage tends to suit that. We also work pretty hard on brand more overtly and through campaigns and being creative and kind of getting our name out there. We put a lot of emphasis and effort and we track pretty obsessively our prompted and our unprompted recognition in the sector and proud to say that our data at least suggests that behind WeWork we're one of the most recognized brands, which is potentially punching well ahead of our weight on a scale front, which is important to us and validating. And what that means is for us, we're doing 75 to 80% of our deals directly rather than through introducers. So sort of flipping that sector average, that sector norm. And so when it comes to acquisition, that's a really important thing, especially at scale, is that we want to be known, recognized, trusted. We want people to come to us directly, and we want to incentivize and reward people for choosing to come to us directly rather than via third parties. And that relates again back to the kind of original principles about having that relationship directly with our members.
Speaking of locations, I think your Farringdon one, I just checked it on my phone. You're actually around the corner from where we are today.
Oh, brilliant. Where are you guys working?
In Barbican. Yeah.
Great.
So
yeah,
we're literally around the corner. So in speaking of sort of retention then, what are your thoughts on the digital nomad sort of trend at the moment? Because I think there's guys sort of come in, typical nomadic style. You don't know when they're going to leave, how long they're going to stick around for. And so how does that work with your business model? And is it something that you're looking into as an organization?
Not directly. I can share some thoughts. Just maybe answering backwards that last question. Not directly. We are looking into being a really, really, really hyper personalizable and flexible workspace solution for everybody within that market. You know, there's definitely a point where we have businesses that have grown and fly the nest, and you know that we're probably not suitable for at that stage. But we're more interested in creating that personalization, so that, as I think I used the phrase earlier, one size fits one, which is a phrase we use, so that no matter how you'd like to work, we have something to offer, and we can kind of meet you where you are in terms of what you need. So I think that's relevant to all types of work, including digital nomads. In terms of is that a trend? Is that something more permanent? Well, I think it's legitimate. I think technology certainly supports it. I think you've got a win-win potentially on both sides. You've got the flexibility and the ability to work from wherever you want and really own your time and location from the point of view of somebody working in that way. But you've also got a global best talent available marketplace for organizations that are willing to embrace it too. And you know, not just geographically, but also contractually, how organizations want to work with people to achieve whatever it is they're trying to achieve. So my general view is that's not a trend. It's just the increasing diversity of how work is done and who works with whom and how one can offer up their knowledge and their services to the world. And our technology will only further enable it rather than go the other way. And we see some of that, and we offer various co-working solutions, and we see people who are solopreneurs, and we see people who are more transient, and we see people who have a a blend of working from home, working from our spaces, multiple spaces, working abroad, and we happy to be part of that. Part of that setup that they have, and we can provide that flexibility. But we're probably more. We have a strong relationship with organizations that are trying to figure out their own hybrid strategies with people who are working either within or closely connected to the business, and we can do that too.
Perfect. Another thing I need to ask, a lot of our clients are interested, or like, at least in our conversations with them, are exploring the recent trends with the Gen AI and what it can do for their businesses. Do you know whether you guys have been looking into what Gen AI and all those tools could mean for your industry, or are you aware of any advancements in the industry looking into this kind of tools?
We have. I probably feel more informed to speak on our behalf rather than the industry's behalf, but I imagine a lot of people are sort of circling the same ideas. I think the first thing to say is innovation, in my opinion, innovation in our industry, and certainly in our part of the industry, isn't just about technology. In fact, it's a lot about the analog ways of doing things as much as it is leveraging technologies. I think about it in terms of experience design, which is holistic. There are lots of ways that technology and AI can improve experience design, and we should be harnessing and leveraging those as much as possible. And I mean, some of that is about removing friction and removing pain, both for our team, so that our human beings working in our organization can focus on things that only humans can do, and not maybe more administrative or repetitive tasks that you could automate, you could outsource, you could certainly make more optimal. And we take advantage of any opportunity that looks like that, and sort of methodically working through processes that we feel we can make a difference with. And then also on our members' side, how can we make the straightest line and the shortest line between what they'd like to do and where they are today, whether it's a small process in a space, or whether it's something grander, whether it's something like choosing a membership with us. Maybe one example to mention is we have incorporated large language models into some of our kind of top of funnel or sort of top mid funnel inquiry processes. We're certainly, when we work with third parties, giving the opportunity where the priority is about speed, giving the opportunity to be able to get back to them on availability and options within seconds, not within minutes or hours, and that helps everybody. And where we have people inquiring directly, if the priority is about speed, I just want to know what's available and where. Obviously, we can serve that up in intelligent ways that are much more intuitive and much quicker using tools like AI. So I think it's about being really thoughtful about where we incorporate technology, but also where we choose not to. The not to example I'll give is we've been really mindful about how much of our member support is funneled through help desks and apps, and how much is encouraging a conversation with one of our team. We take small spaces, we have a personal relationship with everybody in the space. On purpose, we make sure that the ratios between team members and number of members are manageable in order to have that. So we quite like the fact that somebody can pop out and give somebody a wave and say, hey, do you mind helping me with this? Or what do I do about this? And we encourage those collision points as much as we can. So for us, it's a real thoughtful exercise, and it's been choiceful where we incorporate with the larger effort of a holistic experience that we're trying to create that is potentially an in-person, in real life experience. I don't know if that makes any sense, or
Yeah, it makes perfect.
No, I love that, because human first business models like Work.Life, and the way you guys operate being sort of heavily centered around thoughtfulness and the words that you were using, being human first and that sort of thing. And you can use AI to get really geeky about data, and ultimately what happens if data gets averaged, and then once it gets averaged, you sort of scale it. Whereas the power sometimes in an anecdote, where someone might just tell you in passing, is, by the way, Paul, I'm looking for this to sort of expand office space because I'm just about to go and get a Series A fund round, or whatever it may be. And the value that you can get in that, enabling those value adds through those anecdotes and through those stories and just conversations at our water cooler, for example, and then bringing that back into the business strategic discussions as how we can sort of enable and enhance our business model through that, I think is really encouraging to hear. So, I'm quite,
Exactly right. and we get certainly at least as much insight through having a quick leaf through the last 3 days conversations that we've recorded with members, as we do looking at our very many and varied dashboards, which gives us some great insight. But sometimes it's as simple as you say, it's having a conversation, and often those sorts of insights can be quite hard to get hold of through surveys and other ways of kind of ingesting data that aren't the water cooler moment with somebody you trust.
Yeah, and that's why those personal relationships are especially important, as it is the case in your company.
Exactly.
And not another chatbot, like, you know.
And not a chatbot.
Yeah.
If you guys decide you fancy a change from your space in Barbican, and you give us a call, you'll speak to a real person, and they'll really listen to you and really try to understand what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
Okay. And speaking about the future and the emerging trends, I think all of us would agree that a lot of things have changed within your industry, Paul, in the last decade. Do you have any thoughts about how things might differ in the next 10 years? What might be some changes, trends that not everyone might have thought about who is not involved in the industry?
Yeah, I was formulating an answer, and then when you said something other people might have thought about, let's see. These might be obvious points, but yeah, I have a few thoughts. One thing I will say ahead of any of that is one thing that seems to be true is that it depends of it all in terms of people wanting to do all sorts of things and work in all sorts of ways is itself a trend. So, I think mindful not to try and be too narrow in terms of thinking how people will choose to work and how we might meet that, and actually focus more on being able to offer up some really divergent ways of working, which I think is really important to the whole sector, and is probably underpins the growth of flex as a viable option. I think you said at the top, for businesses that might have seen it as more appropriate to startups or early stage, and realizing actually perhaps that's if you strip that away, what it is about customization and flexibility in a really dynamic marketplace and environment. But one thing I will say, and I've touched on, is I think thinking of workspace as a service, not as just the underlying sort of desks and chairs. It's not a container for work anymore, so it's got to give back. And you could probably, we could talk about the sorts of experiential offerings that you might tie to that, but I think it's really important, and it will be increasingly important in terms of consolidation of the brands that people will recognize and gravitate to, being service and holistic experiences, not just office spaces. And again, in a crowded market, be really important for the brands and the businesses that want to be successful to stand out in that way and be clear on what they can offer. And I think you can connect that to the general idea of the third space. And I mean, you're seeing fitness centers and gyms offering workspace. You're seeing workplaces offer that. You're seeing, I think, a rise of kind of wellness options, both and analog in-person experiences or spaces that aren't maybe being stuck at home, or doing everything via digital tools. So I think the workspace lives in that world too. And it's about thinking as a third space for people and understanding that it's not about a decision between working from home or working from the office. It's a toolbox, and it's about the right environment for the right thing, and it's how do you fit into that set of choices for an individual. So that flexibility and the concept of service and experience as a third space for people, and an in-person third space for people, I think is going to be, it already is important, and I think increasingly important. I think that's where we'll go. Also seeing a bit of specialization in terms of the ecosystems that people are creating. There's some really interesting operators that are offering a very niche set of services. I think shout out to Until, who are focused on physiotherapists and PTs and fitness practitioners. So they're offering up rooms and amenities and equipment that serves that audience. We have seen things like essentially shared kitchen services for food providers, which is another one where you're able to share amenity that's very specific to that market. So I imagine we'll see more specialized ecosystems as well. And then sustainability is something we haven't talked about yet, but the kind of the expectation, rather than, it's not a nice to have. I think both sustainable buildings and sustainable practices, and potentially the certification behind that. We're a B Corp, for instance, and we have been now for 4 years and are recertifying at the moment. And that's the framework we've chosen. But being able to but both to evidence it, but also sustainably commit to it is going to be expected, not a nice to have. And if that is something people aren't thinking about at the moment, I think that's a really important one for operators to be thinking about, and also for landlords as well, of course.
Yes, I think this, in general, the move that we've experienced of thinking about the office as something quite commoditized in the past to really differentiate or for your workforce. I think this trend is especially impactful for employees themselves, right? And the way they interact with one another and how the workspace can drive the innovation within specific business or communities, as you mentioned.
Exactly. It's got to justify itself. It can't just be just because. Why the office? Why are we in the office? What is it achieving that other ways of working aren't? And you've got to have a really good justification behind the point and what it's giving back.
Absolutely. Paul, I just wanted to ask, do you have any message that you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Sure. Well, I think it'd be remiss of me not to go back to our core message, which is that happiness at work really matters. I think it's easy to agree with that statement and also not act on it. I doubt, I don't run into anyone who disagrees, let's say, but being able to kind of operationalize that on a daily basis within an organization is really hard. And I think one thing we can fall back on is the research around how much more productive, more creative, more likely to stay, happier employees are than unhappy employees. And that's real and that's tangible and that's business difference. And one of the conversations we're often having with members and more prospective members, I think members that are with us generally get it and are bought into it, but prospective members is to try to make that really tangible and make it commercial, as well as ethical, right? And I think that's probably a message it would be nice to leave on, that it's not just a good thing to do and matters to all of us, but it can really make a difference for your business if you prioritize it.
Any social media handles in terms of how any audience or listeners could get in touch with Work.Life or yourself?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I can't remember my hand. It's probably my name, Paul Dutnall. But Work.Life, yes. I mean, our website is work.life. Really simple. We're on Instagram. We're on LinkedIn. I think we're on TikTok as well. I think we're doing some fun things over there. So if you put work.life into pretty much any search engine or any social media, I'm sure we'll pop up and love you to have a look at some of the things we're doing.
We'll definitely expand on some discussions around the workspace as well. Marcin and I have been discussing internally with regards to what sort of events we can do in cool spaces. So
brilliant. We're here to help
in
any way we can.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul, for your time. It has really been a pleasure. And thanks everyone for listening to the Venture Playbook Podcast by SIA.